Previously on Alaskan. The summer has come and gone, and for the first time in weeks, the sun will set alone on the shores of the Seward Peninsula. It's not long after the crew and participants of the Gold Prospectors Association of America's Alaska Gold Expedition arrive home that they begin anticipating the next season. The memories they've created will remain in their minds and in their hearts for the rest of their lives. Now, we head back nearly 3 decades to relive one man's dream as we imagine a time where this all began. We will see how his spirit and determination turned his vision into a reality right here on Alaskan. George Buzzard Massey, a visionary who certainly did not lack passion. A small-town Kentucky boy with dreams larger than life. In 1968, he started a small club known today as the Gold Prospectors Association of America, the country's largest prospecting organization.
He had this vision, and there was nothing that was going to stand in his way.
Well, my dad was he did a lot of talking on TV. But if he said he was going to do something, he would do it. He was a doer. A lot of people say things that they think they want to do or they're interested in doing, but never happens. Well, with him, if he said something, it was something that was going to get done.
You know, he wasn't always right. You know, sometimes, he was wrong. But his philosophy was, well, if you push hard enough in the wrong direction, your weight will knock over what you're trying to get accomplished anyways. So he's just a pusher. Somebody that just get things done one way or another.
It's almost like he had a script. He just always knew what to do. And he was a very amazing person.
From the GPAA to Outdoor Channel, George utilized the outlets he created to share his knowledge of prospecting, ultimately allowing for tens of thousands of men and women to be blessed by gold fever.
I sat in on one of George's lectures, and I learned, more in that half-hour lecture than I've learned, the last 5 or 6 years by myself. So I joined the club.
One thing the GPAA has always strived to achieve is providing new land for its members to prospect. One of its more notable properties was first thought up in the summer of 1980.
I tell you, boy, we had a nice fire pit there. And in the evenings, we'd sit around there and shoot the breeze. And
so the Buzzard's sitting around the campfire there, the Italian bar, and that's not a bar, it's a gravel bar, not a drinking bar. Some people get that confused, but sitting around there with some of the other members of the Lost Dutchmans, and they're just shooting the breeze and they're around the campfire, maybe throwing a few back, and they started talking about going up to Alaska.
And Buzzard said, by God, Bookie, why don't we go to Alaska? And that started the ball rolling.
The more he talked about it, the more people wanted to go, and that's where he got the idea to do a trip to Alaska.
His Uncle John was up there during the gold rush era and then came back to Kentucky where he's at and told stories about the gold rush era. So it was always in his head about going up to Alaska and always going up there mining. So that was, that adventure part, and he made it a reality.
The Buzzard was serious about bringing a group to Alaska, but knowing where to set up camp in this massive state required a bit of research.
We went up there in 1981 and did some research and checked out a few areas, and we looked around the Fairbanks area, and he met an old prospector up there named Bill Munns, and talked him into going looking for gold in the Nome area.
See, the Buzzard, before he'd done anything, he'd studied the history like you can't believe. He was really a history nut, and he knew more about Nome before we ever got there than I'll probably ever know.
After learning the lay of the land, George settled on the Casa de Baca River and felt it was time to begin the inaugural Alaska Gold Expedition. So in 1982, George, along with 7 other guys, made up the original crew and headed up north to build a camp that would soon house 100 prospectors for the summer.
I'll never forget, you know, busting our way in there that first time, and we got in there to that old busted down cabin that those old timers had back in there.
Buzzard went in there and started throwing out the stuff out the window and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "We're gonna sleep here." And I thought, Buzzard, you lost your mind. How did I know that was gonna be my home for 3 years?
So we started trying to pull things out of there and clean it up a little bit because it was pretty musty, and there was an old bunk bed over in the corner. And I remember Buku going over there and trying to lift on it, and they couldn't lift that thing up because it was sunk into the permafrost. Permafrost had a hold of the legs, and I went over there and I lifted on that thing. We couldn't get that thing up out of there because it was stuck in the permafrost. That was a cold night too, sleeping on that permafrost.
And that's the way we lived for 3 years every damn summer.
When we come back, we'll get a look into some of the challenges of running a trip of this caliber. And later, we'll see the transformation of the Cripple River Mining Camp, along with a look into its future.
He made it a reality. He, you know, sent the letters out there to lifetime GPA members and got 100 guys the first year. I think they picked a place that was a little bit more remote than I think anybody figured on, to go out to the Casa de Baca River.
I mean, this was way, way out there. This is almost 80 miles from town, from Nome. Nome's the middle of nowhere, and this place is 80 miles from there.
Building a camp capable of housing over 100 people in only a couple weeks seems like a huge undertaking. But simply getting the supplies out to a place that remote was a struggle in itself.
We had 80 tons of gear we hauled in there that year. We'd break down or something would happen to a vehicle, get it stuck, unload all the stuff off of it. And sometimes we'd have it stacked so high you couldn't believe it. All kind of dredges and high bankers.
There was 56 river crossings on this highway.
And eventually it all got to camp, but that was no easy business.
Once they finally arrived with all the gear, the next step was building a place for 100 people to sleep.
We were able to build and construct 4 large, sort of like dormitories.
We call them condos. They were 4 foot high. You had to walk around on almost your hands and knees.
We got in these cabins that would hold 25, 30 people in one cabin. You know, everybody had their own separate bunks. It was like an army barracks.
These were not the most ideal living arrangements, but the participants were not there to sleep. They were there for the gold.
We put 20 dredges in the river.
And I'll never forget, we assigned 4-man teams. Each 4-man team had a dredge. And Buzzard gave them this pep talk, set them up, and turned them loose. And I'll never forget, he was so tickled. Just almost dance a jig, watching those guys run out there to that river to go dredging.
The participants were relieved that they had arrived at the camp after a long, treacherous journey from Nome.
We got out there on these school buses and an old Ryder rental truck. And then we got in the back of the truck and had to put a scarf on, keep the dust off our face, and we drove 80 miles down these dirt roads to get out to this river.
They used to tease Blueberry John that he drove the bus up there and he only ran over one person. And he did. He had the bus and he was going through the river and he knocked the clutch out, and then he got into the river and the bus drowned out in the river. So they got everybody off the bus to push start the bus in the river. So they're pushing the bus in the river and he gets it going again, but he can't pull the clutch, so he's got to stay in first gear and roll along real slow in the river. So everybody had to jump back on the bus while the bus is rolling, and some guy got caught in the current of the water and slipped down underneath the bus, and Blueberry drove over his legs. And luckily, I think the buoyancy of the water, he didn't get hurt too bad, but we used to tease Blueberry, you only drove over one guy, that was pretty good.
And then we went up this real steep hill, and we had to park there because we would have got stuck in the mud if we went any farther. George said, well, another 200 yards up this way, and then you get to this old water pump and you hang a left. And
My dad was always telling these guys, well, that's only 200 yards. Well, it's more like 2.5 miles. And they had to walk across the tundra, across all the bogs.
Later on, I heard that referred to as the Tundra Death March. That was our way into camp.
Well, by the time the guys got all the way out there, they were all beat up and tired and dusty, and it was just a mess.
So after a rough start to their trip, the participants were determined to find good gold. But after a lot of hard work, that didn't go as well as anyone had hoped.
One of the guys that was on one of the dredge teams was an older gentleman, and he was not very good at dredging, so his team kind of kicked him out, right? So they didn't want him on his team, so his name was Doc Emerson.
Buzzard said, Buku, what are we gonna do, send him back home? I said, hell no, he paid his money just like everybody else did.
He kind of hem-hawed along, came up with a plan, and he put me and Buku with Doc up in this gulch. And we went up in this gulch and we started digging up there in the head part of the gulch, and I opened up a hole, about a bathtub-sized hole. The top foot of material is like tundra muck. It's just old vegetation. There's no gold in it. You got to get down to the washed around gravels down lower. So I was opening up this hole for Doc to get going in, and everything was going along good, and you know, and Doc's happy and Buku's happy.
I'm helping him out, and we're panning this sluice box out one time, and I'm raking the stuff out, and I roped out one, and man, I look at that, and I put it back in there, and he's looking over my shoulder. He said, was that a nugget, Buku? And said, Doc Emerson, I sure hope it was, because hell, it was about as big as my thumb.
I had to go back to the kitchen to help my dad with cooking. So I'm opening up all these bean cans, and some of the guys from their river operation started coming back in. And man, they weren't too happy. They weren't finding much gold on the river. You know, one guy pulled out a bottle. It was a 1 ounce bottle, and he had about 2 pennyweights in there. You know, it was about the best that we'd seen. Another guy had like 12 grains. Another guy had like a 10-grain picker. But man, they were like, man, Buzzard, you know, you bring us all the way out here in the middle of no place, Alaska, and there ain't no gold out here, you know. And my dad's kind of happy that there's no trees around, so they can't string him up. But I mean, it was getting pretty dire, you know. Things were getting like kind of scary around camp, man. Everybody's, you know, we're out here in the middle of no place. We ain't getting no gold, and we're supposed to be on this gold expedition, you know. And so in comes to the chow hall. Here comes Doc Emerson, and Doc comes in and he pulls out a 2 ounce bottle. It's plumb full of nice nuggets. And my dad looks at that and he says, Doc, did you bring that from home? And Doc said, nope, I picked that out of the sluice box, that stuff that Tom and Buku were running up there today.
And when the guys saw that, my God, there was a race for the damn gulch.
They were fighting each other trying to get out the door, you know, get out of the chow hall. And they left their plates of beans just laying there hot on the table, you know. And they're all fighting, and they all rush up to the gulch, and it got crazy. Everybody was nuts. And so my dad came up with a plan. He got a book, and inside the book, it was $1 to register your claim. He made a little quick map, and from the stake, you put a stake in the ground, and 2 shovel links from that stake was your claim. And in 25 minutes, from the mouth of the gulch all the way up to the top, it was completely claimed up.
100 men that had a ball. And Buzzard said, by God, we're gonna keep this going.
It was 2,000 ounces or better that we pulled out of there over the next 4 years.
By 1985, the trip had grown to over 400 participants, and George decided it was time to find a new site for the expedition, somewhere a little easier to access from Nome. When we come back, we'll take a look at the early years of the Cripple River mining camp, as well as some plans for its future. The Casa de Baca camp was a rich site, and a lot of gold was collected from there in a short amount of time. But as the trip became more popular, the Buzzard felt it would be a good idea to move to a larger property. Ideally, one that was a little closer to Nome.
We started running into too much permafrost, so we started looking for other places to prospect. And my dad got the line on that big piece of real estate there at the Cripple River.
Instead of being 80 miles out, we're only 12 miles out, really easy to service. It just made a lot of sense. So they moved everything to Cripple River.
He and I went up to Seattle and bought $35,000 worth of lumber. Said, Buku, we're going to build a whole mining camp. Going to call it Cripple River Mining Camp. And I thought, you know, this guy is wild. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going with him.
They purchased all the equipment, all the lumber, everything they needed to build this camp, shipped it up there in the spring, had it all barged up to Nome. Then we had to carry it from Nome in trucks out to the camp and then build this camp from start to finish before the participants got there.
The only problem was the barge was 2 weeks late. Everybody was scrambling around. You know, we only had 3 weeks before the guests arrived, and we didn't have any buildings up yet.
Main Street at the Cripple River stands today as a symbol of the hard work and perseverance a handful of guys put forth to make this camp a reality.
I said, how much time do we actually have? And he said, we have 3 weeks, that's all we have. So I said, yeah, I'll get it done. Well, he didn't believe me. He made me a bet. I couldn't build that town in 3 weeks. And
we started building, and I remember old Buzzard throwing them 2x4s out. He said, this is gonna be the mess hall. Right on the tundra.
The Buzzard was the layout guy. He would mark things and lay it out, and then me and Buku were the nailers. We'd nail it. He'd mark it, we nail it.
And up come our town. Had boardwalks, had fronts, and all the fronts. Buzzard hand-painted every damn front on there, hand-painted a name for everybody's hooch, and he was something else. He was a working dude.
Probably the most hardest working guy that was out there was my dad. There's nobody that could outwork him. He was just an amazing workaholic, and people would be dropping at his sides as he's going through hammering nails on these hooches, and you know, just to make sure that they got done before the participants got there. But
we got it built. We got the camp built before everybody showed up. It was, I never would have believed it, but Buzzard did it.
with a day to spare. So I won the bet. George got his town built. Everybody was happy. You know, that was just a phenomenal feat. That was just so much fun.
The camp was built and the first wave of participants arrived, kicking off the first summer at the Cripple River Mining Camp. These were the men and women that continued to raise the bar year after year, ultimately making this camp what it is today.
At Cripple River, we have radio service to town, and we also have cell phone service. You know, we've got a satellite dish for getting internet service. You know, George would just be going, you know.
Basically, what's different today than it was then is that we have a lot better amenities, and people are pretty much self-contained out there at camp. We've got big freezers and all the best food that you can imagine that you can get out on the tundra.
It's not the real hardcore prospector camp anymore, unless you go out to the remote camps. If you go out to the remote camps, you still get that, you know, even though we have showers at Ketchmark and the dredge camp, just to make life a little easier.
I mean, we got a few more creature comforts, you know, showers and laundry service, you know, and food's good, you know. So but it's a mining camp. It's always been that, you know, kind of mining camp atmosphere, but I think it's just where it's at, its location that just really grounds it.
This property has seen some major expansion since its first summer, and when we come back, we'll see even more. We're getting an inside look at the future plans of this great land. A lot of the 2,200 acres that make up the GPAA's property on the Cripple River has yet to be prospected.
We've got miles and miles of river up there that just haven't been explored in the last 20 or 30 or 40 years, and some of it ever.
There's a lot of places up there that ain't had a gold pan stuck in them. A lot of creeks, there's a lot of prospecting that needs to be done.
This is all good gold-bearing land, and the GPAA is constantly making strides to open this up for the participants to explore.
I've actually kind of been working on this spot for the last 3 years, doing some testing and sampling and bringing people up here. And we've taken quite a bit of gold out already, so we're pretty excited about this spot.
Corey Rudolph and Blake Harmon feel strongly that one spot in particular will be very promising for years to come. So the GPAA decided to build a new camp.
There's a lot of opportunity out there to do some prospecting, and the camp's going to be right in the middle of it. So it's really exciting to see what this is going to lead to.
This will give them more of a wilderness type experience. They won't be right along the beach. They'll already be out here, and there's all kinds of material for them to dig, and there's another 10 miles of river up above them.
It looks like there's going to be good gold there, and there's also a lot of property that we have in an area there that we have room to build a camp like this.
Toward the end of the season, a handful of guys made their way out on the tundra and constructed a new chow hall. This marks the site that will end up being a 40-person camp in a nugget-rich environment.
When you want to get serious about exploring and prospecting and trying to find the next big strike, you can go out there. It's going to be a smaller group of people, and you're going to be out there, you know, busting your butt trying to find the mother lode, you know.
As we look back at the progression of the Alaska Gold Expedition over the last 30 years, we can see a lot of change. But as long as the traditions that were started by its founders continue to play an integral role each summer, the spirit behind this trip will never die.
I'm trying, George. You know, we're still making it work.
He was an amazing guy, and you know, we miss him, but he really started that whole camp out there, and it's, you know, it's his legacy that we have. It's a special thing.
This is an experience in my life and in a lot of people's life. It'll never ever change. It'll never be the same, because there'll never be another trip like the Buzzard put on.
It's those souls that roam around the pole. You know, the Buzzard roamed. He was a prospector. You know, you go to the ends of the earth, and you go beyond that, and that's where you'll find the prospector's cabin, out there in the way beyond. And that's what it's about, is out there prospecting, and that's what he's doing. That's where his gravesite is, up there prospecting, out in the wilderness. Just the prospector spirit, and that's where he's at, is out there prospecting on.
For more information on being a part of the Alaska Gold Expedition, log on to goldprospectors.org.